Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of February 10th. We have the school committee and superintendent here tonight to present their budget. Bridget, want to get started?
Yes, good evening, thank you. So just with me tonight, just so you know, Mike Frisha, and then I have Dr. Quealy from Special Education Director, Bill Hahn, Assistant Superintendent, and Nancy Gallivan. Bill Buckley could not be here because he has the flu. And Mike Frisha just got over the flu, so you may want to stay away from the school department for a little bit.
Could you repeat his name?
Sure, it's Dr. John Quealy,
Spell the last name, Q-U?
Queally.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I have a PowerPoint in the back, but I thought that if your eyes are starting to go like mine, that you would probably want a handout, so I decided to give you a handout as well. So first, just to start, we want you to have a more complete understanding of our budget. So the intention tonight is to start with a general overview. And then at the end, we'd like to hear your questions so that when we return, so we will be back as many times as needed, so we'll be back. We can cover those areas. We'd also like to ask the Finance Committee members that even after this evening, what you hear tonight, if you have any further questions or need more explanations, you want to dive into something a little further, please feel free to reach out to us through Mark, and we'd be happy to answer, give you a phone call or an email and answer your questions.
Okay.
And with that, so as part of my induction into the superintendency, I developed an entry plan. And as part of that, developed some entry plan findings. It was a pretty rigorous process. And what was really helpful for me is being in this district 28 years and counting, that what superintendents do is they want to make the strange familiar. What I needed to do was make the familiar strange. So this really gave me a bird's eye view of the district, and really embrace the role. So as you can see from the slides, that I developed a plan in the summer and collected data from July all the way through December. And those were just observations, a lot of interviews, thank you, Mark, and different members of the boards, some document analysis, a lot of stakeholder meetings and school and community events. And within that is that some themes developed, some strengths, some three themes around student, that focused on student learning and growth and learning in a 21st century world, and then also looking at our district culture and providing opportunities for all of our students. So really looking at that and having some patterns, and they're not solutions, they're looking at strengths and opportunities for growth. And then my next step is to work with the leadership team to develop a strategy for district improvement. And that's usually a 3 to 5 year plan. So really, I'm really grateful for all of you and all of those on the board that took their time to provide such open and honest feedback. And really, the process has only strengthened my appreciation for the schools and for the Walpole community. I did present the findings to school committee on January 30th, and then what I'll do is you'll see the plan. I'll put it on the superintendent website, and hopefully get another superintendent's newsletter out, and I'll attach that on there as well. Next slide, thanks. So some of the things that I noticed in my entry plan, and just as in general, these are some of the strengths of Walpole Public Schools. Many people, in terms of my conversations, noted that Walpole High School is a high-performing district with an eye on student learning. Many people informed me that they moved to Walpole because of the schools. The example told me they had choices between Dover and Westwood and surrounding towns, but they moved to Walpole because of the schools and what we were able to provide for them. They noted our extracurricular programming. From the robotics and the film festival, the drama, those are some things that were noted. Our program of studies, the AP courses that we offer, and also the credit recovery. The instructional support, the community was very thankful of the instructional support that has been built throughout the years, most recently with our digital learning coaches, our literacy coach in the elementary school, and our math coaches at the elementary and middle level, and providing just different intervention strategies to help to meet the needs of all of our learners. Families were happy with class size. They also wanted to make a point to really recognize our commitment to social and emotional learning. That's not only our mental health, our emotional and mental health, but also taking a look at developing the tools and the skills that the students need in order to be successful. So it could just be about regulating emotions. It could be about how you need to treat others with respect and be able to argue in a non-defensible way and to see other people's viewpoints in a respectful manner. Also giving the teachers the tools and the skills to be able to handle our changing needs that are in our classroom. They noted our improvements that we've made in the music program, as well as the strong art and athletics that we have. They commended the special education programs, that the work that the school department does, and the progress we've made to keep students in district. Dr. Quiller will be talking this week, this Thursday, about the special education programs that our district provides to keep students in-house. The FullDay Kindergarten was very much appreciated, and they mentioned, especially the parents, that the commitment that the town has made. Back in 2013 and 2014, we had 77% of our families in full-day kindergarten. The year that we started this 7-year plan, in 2017-2018, we had 86%. 86% in full-day kindergarten. In 2018 and 19, that grew to 91, and this year we're at 96%. So you can see the improvements that we have made, and hopefully we'll be able to continue that. And then finally, the community partnerships. A lot of people mention the partnerships, not only with the Council on Aging, the police, the fire, but they mentioned the partnerships that they're seeing with the boards. I guess many years ago, that wasn't always the case. So they have really made it a point to commend us with that, and hopefully have that continue with the school department and the other boards. And then finally, just a district pride. Not only a school pride, but a town pride was evident throughout the community. And just to note, too, as well, that there have been significant changes in administration this year, that the Leadership Council, I know that it's been stable in the past, but we've had, due to some well-deserved retirements, we've had 9 new leadership positions that have come in both within and outside the district. So we really see this as an opportunity for some multiple perspectives, some fresh ideas, as we collectively work to build relationships and to improve teaching and learning. So we've had some demographic shifts in Walpole, and I just want to briefly comment on that as our communities change, the schools often see the changes first before they're defined in the community at large. So it's really important that as a school system, we address these changes in student population, and we investigate our delivery models and our resources to support our staff and to support our students, because there really is the need to meet all of our learners. And, you know, we value the programs and services that we've been able to provide, but the needs of some of these learners are even more compelling. So if you look at 2005, we had 14 English learners, okay? And now in 2019, that number has jumped to 133. As of late January, we are up to 142 and growing. These families are coming in, and we need to make sure that they're supported. Another interesting stat is that we have our English learners, and then we have our formally language learners. We used to call them called FLEPs, and those are students who then, you know, kind of come off some of the support services, but they still need interventions and support, because they may be able to understand the language, but they've only maybe been here for a few years. We have in total in the district 470 students who are classified as English learners and then formally English learners. So that is really increasing. Today, 10% of our students' first language is not English, And over 30 students this year recently arrived in the United States. So just some interesting statistics. And then if you look at your next slide or your next packet, I just thought that was interesting. It's really hard to see. You'll need your glasses for that one. But it shows that we have approximately 385 families who speak languages other than English, that is not their first language. And you can see the highest percentage is Portuguese. That's our largest population out of those communities, 23%. And that seems to be the largest population that's enrolling in our school system. The next slide you can just see in terms of race, a 10-year overview from
Excuse me, on that,
Sure.
the English language, why is there such an explosion? Like,
Well-
why are they picking Walpole to come to? And
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there's probably a couple reasons. It may not just be Walpole. We've seen demographic changes around our areas. I think just some of the desire, they know that Walpole's a good school system. They may move from other communities, maybe start in other communities and then be able to move up. Also looking at, what we're able to afford. It'll be interesting as we build more affordable housing. Not all EL families, and that's another, I don't want to say bias, that just because they're ELs, they may need, affordable housing. They're just coming from all over. We do see the highest population from Brazil. I know that many, many years ago when we had the earthquake in Haiti, we saw an influx in the Haitian population, so families moving over and then bringing their families over. So I don't want to speculate, but as certain families are coming over from Brazil, I don't know if anybody else has Bill, we've seen.
I think your point that it's not just Walpole. I think when I meet with some directors in other districts who talk about EL service, I think most of our neighbors are experiencing the same uptick in population.
And last year, when we hit 100 families, by law, through DESE, we created an English Learner Pack. So now we have an English Learner Pack, and Bill Hahn is heading that up this year. And we have families that are participating, active participants, and we've also instituted to help families learn the English language as well.
Are they as far as the number, is it spread throughout all the grades? Is it primarily first and second graders?
Yeah, I actually have that. It's spread throughout. Walpole High School, for example, has 31 now students. It's spread. Elm has 23, Boyden 30. So they are spread throughout, and we have tutors, but not enough, and it doesn't provide the equity, which I'll talk about. Like, we have one tutor who only goes to one middle school for one period of day, and it's the same time of the day, so those students are always missing, their first period class. So there's got to be a better way to help these students to make sure that they not only learn the language, but it's harder when you're coming over to the country as a middle schooler and a high schooler than maybe a kindergarten or a first grade, because you're not only, learning to read, but now you have to read to learn.
And my last question, so the top three, it's Portuguese, Spanish, and
Yeah, can you see that?
Arabic.
The three at the bottom.
Arabic, yeah.
And those actually, with our EL pack, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, that when we translate, or most of our English pack are Portuguese, Spanish, and Arabic.
Yeah,
And Haitian.
Can I just jump in for 1 second? The adult English language learning class, do you have, how many people? Not who, but how many people do you have in that?
Approximately about 25.
That's
adult
great.
learners. Yep.
That's great.
Yeah, last year we had a wait list. So we have
Wow.
one staff member, or one person teaching it now, hopefully growing, and
I'm glad
there's
to
a
see
need.
it.
There's
Yeah.
definitely a need.
just one last question. Are these families moving into Walpole, or are these families that, say, live in Millis, but they can go to the Walpole schools if they choose?
They're moving to Walpole,
So they're-
registering in
Okay,
Walpole, yes.
thanks.
Mhm. Just wanted to also include the race, the 10-year overview. You can see certain populations that are growing, the Asian population, Hispanic population, and then a multi-race, non-Hispanic population growing. So you can see the decrease in the white population, just showing that Walpole's becoming more and more diverse, and as I mentioned, we see it more in the schools first than in the larger community. So looking at tonight's budget request really extends our investment by looking at 4 drivers. And what was interesting is looking at these drivers, it really stemmed or worked nicely or overlapped with my entry plan, looking and talking to this community and to these stakeholders, taking a look at what some of our strengths are and then where are some of our opportunities for growth. So it really extends our investment by continuing to build on a strong Walpole Public School foundation. That's everything, not just academics, everything that I had just mentioned. Really ensuring a comprehensive curriculum, again, extending past just the academics. Investing in strong professional development. We know that research shows when you give targeted professional development and timely professional development, intense professional development to staff, it directly impacts the instructional core in teaching and learning. And we're doing a tremendous amount of work with that from the elementary and looking at the foundations and the Lucy Calkins writing program all the way up through the math and the middle schools and looking at the high schools. And then most importantly, it is our duty that we provide equitable support services and resources necessary for all children to succeed. And that means closing the achievement gaps, which we need to continue to work on closing. The DESE, noted in our accountability scores that we are making substantial progress towards our targets, but we need to continue to move in that direction. We need to make sure that we continue to address our social emotional well-being of our children, and again, addressing the diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Pardon me, Dr. Goff. The achievement gaps, would this be like on MCAS scores, kids that are not achieving certain
Yes,
target
that's
levels?
one way to measure it. We have other different data that we're looking at in terms of our math benchmark data that we have internally, and looking at our English benchmark data. But when you're looking at that, in terms of what the state is doing, because what had happened was districts were saying, oh yeah, we're closing the achievement gap. But what they were doing is they were doing this, okay? We need to do this. And you're looking at, particularly what the state is looking at is your lowest 25% in that group, and really looking at closing the gaps. But it's terms of, and there are new regulations and guidelines for English learners in terms of how you need to close those target gaps each year for those 7 years so that they are able to demonstrate proficiency. Your special education, and then you also have your low income, and then also race. So there are a lot of gaps. And before, certain schools, if they didn't have a certain number, they weren't considered a subgroup. So then they would say, okay, you're meeting all of your goals. And typically, for example, across the state, in middle schools, there's always a subgroup because you're bringing all of these elementary schools together. Now what they're doing is they're saying, okay, everybody has your lower 25% that you need to get up. So everybody has a subgroup. So it's leveled the playing field, but it's also really targeting, making sure that we're providing opportunities for all students to learn.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so looking at the next page, so just bear with me so I can kind of get through these 2 slides and then take questions, because it's really important that we set the tone, and we want to present you the levels of service, and we acknowledge that as of today, we're not set to receive enough funding for even this lowest option that we'll get into. But we really hope and we're confident that we'll be able to work from both sides, from the town administrator side and also the school department side, to achieve the best option that we're able to be able to be fiscally responsible and fiscally accountable. This budget request is extraordinary because you're going to notice that there's a very large special ed abnormality. So I just want to take you through that piece. So when you look at the base budget, and the town administrator has come in and, as you know, has recommended the 3.3% increase, so 47,612,190. So when you look at the base budget, what the base budget is comprised of is the 900,000 is the collective bargaining. So that is, and jump in if you know there's something that goes amiss here. When you take a look, that's your COLA, your steps, and I do have to commend the WTA with the collaborative work, because the contract negotiations, we've negotiated a 1.5, a 1.5, a 1.75 over the 3 years. So this reflects the 1.5 increase with our cost of living and our steps, the total of $900,000. The total FY20 positions that were added is a total of approximately, you can see that, 253,544. I just want to mention the additional staffing. We will be submitting the personnel FTE document for the next meeting, because like I said, we will be back. And so we can have the opportunity to really provide some specific details behind it. So we will get that to you, and we will get that to you well before the next meeting. So if you, what I really want to draw your attention to is this Medicaid reduction and the special education increase. So what has happened is that MassHealth is approving Medicaid funding differently starting this year. That we've been advised that about 250,000 will be eligible as compared to the 587,000. So looking at that and why that is, and why that creates a $315,000 shortfall, that is not just us, that is across the state. It has to do with 3 areas. It primarily has to do with billable services, of what is being deemed billable for us. And it's really determining what is educational billing versus what is medical billing. The second point is that private schools, they are recommending that their members not complete the billing documentation until appropriate training and clarification from MassHealth. So a lot of our private schools are out of districts, are pulling out, or they're waiting. They're in moratorium now, so they are not billing. And then the third is that we need to get parent consent or authorization in order to complete the billing. So Nancy Gallivan has written our legislators to see if they can withdraw that, so we can go ahead and bill without parental consent. There was a meeting, a February school-based Medicaid program training that Dr. Quealy and Kathy Coleman were going to attend. But however, we had received some information in late January, on January 24th, that they were postponing the regional February training in order to ensure that they were able to answer all the questions and concerns that everybody had. So they have heard our questions and concerns about topics such as medical necessity, documentation requirements, and the challenge of understanding how the Medicaid program guidance applies in practice to the educational setting. So they are going to work across the state with their agencies to provide us with clear guidance. But we will not get anywhere near the original amount that we had anticipated for the 587. Moving forward, with that said, we can now budget the $250,000 that we are predicted to get. But this is an anomaly. This was something that we didn't expect, so we're going to be reduced by $315,000. The second piece of the special education is the increase, and you can see that increase of $221,000. And that's a result of all the net changes. The contributors are out of districts. And we educate students from 3 years old until 22 for special education. And we have students that are out of district, and we don't, correct me if I'm wrong, any students that are coming off this year. So therefore, we have a $221,000 increase. I also want to point out, it would have been higher. It would have been $271,000, but we were able to shave off $50,000 in the goods and service budget in order to reduce that deficit. But when you take those two into account, your 315 and your 221, you can see that there's a 536,000. It would have been higher, it would have been $50,000 higher, but it is what it is, and if it was one, if it was just Medicaid or just the out-of-district tuitions, it would have been more manageable, but when you're putting both together, it's almost like the perfect storm in terms of a deficit. So when you look at that and you look at the total percentage increase, it's a 3.66, not the 3.33 the town administrator is recommending. So that leaves us with a $170,000 gap. That is just right out of the gate. That is not even including the second column, which is our positions that we need to have according to taking a look at DESI and our NEASC. So when you look at those positions of what we need to have, for example, our high school PE wellness teacher, that's a have due to our regs. We currently have 800 plus students taking phys ed, and our regs are saying that every student has to take physical education course. So next year we'll need to add another 275 seniors. So we need to be able to integrate our upper level health component and integrate that into our senior year. So you can see that we need to do that. Also on there are, as you see, our English as ESOL teachers, so there's English as a second language. One is to provide equity across the district in the ESP. We're able to do that at a lower rate as of the $55,000 instead of the $35,000, and that's also would be primarily at the high school because the number has risen, quite dramatically, and also our FLEPs are being tracked, and the plan is so it's to be able to have these different levels and to provide support across the entire high school. So it's looking at providing equity across the district, but also we have what's called as the Look Act, language opportunity for our kids through DESI, and they have increased accountability of what we need to be able to do for our English learners. And that's part of benchmarking. It also has includes a census now for our pre-K, which has not been in the past. So it's looking at all of those in the Look Act in terms of the accountability and also to provide equity across the district. So those positions total $160,000. So you can see, if it wasn't for the Medicaid reduction, that this wouldn't even be so much of an issue. So when you look at that of just base budget, that is a 4% increase, which gives us our gap of $330,000, which is 0.7%. So when you look at that, that's really in terms of, cutting 6 positions in terms of that 4 point. So if you can bear with me for one more slide, and then I'll take questions, and then I'll have a drink of water. If you look at that next slide, so that's the base budget. The FY21 is what school committee voted to recommend, and I support is the 4.8% increase. It was originally at a 5.0, but we looked at some efficiencies and we were able to get that down to a 4.8. So everything, if you look over in that left-hand column, is what we just talked about. The middle column at the top is the required positions. And what I failed to mention as part of that, you'll see the $15,000. So you're thinking, what is that going to do? How's that going to reduce our kindergarten tuition? What that $15,000 does, and Mike looked at the numbers, it sets aside money for families who want to attend full-day K but need assistance. They can't afford it. Again, providing opportunity for all of our families to be able to experience success. So we really want them to be able to, if they want to go to full-day K, we want to be able to afford them the opportunity. And looking at the numbers, Mike and I feel confident that setting aside that $15,000, correct, will allow families who need some financial assistance to attend full-day K. So that's why that's a high priority. When you look at the bottom figures of adding those essential in positions, what does that look like and why do we need them? So the elementary counselors, those are 2 elementary counselors Currently, what that would do is that would enable us to have 2 elementary counselors at every building. Right now, they have 1.5, and they are very thankful, the principals and the staff, for having that staff that we were able to add. But what we need to do is we need to increase the consistency. We need to increase to be able to have the supports that we need. You know, there was an article that came from another school to talk about the importance of counselors, and I thought it was very well said, and I just want to quote it. When you invest in school counselors, you're not just investing in students' academic achievement, mental health, and college and career readiness. It's an investment in the entire school, in families and whole communities. Counselors have time to visit classrooms and tend to all students, not just those who are undergoing a crisis. We tend to think of counselors helping one subset, and that's not true. You have all different achievers that are looking for support for your counselors. You even have high level of achievers that have high anxiety, suicidal ideation that the counselors are working with. When you put the counselors into the classroom, and when you put the counselors in to also help the teachers and to help the students, you're allowing the principals to get into the classrooms more. The principals are the instructional leaders. So when they're in the classrooms, they're improving the instructional core, which then improves all learners. For example, when I'm doing my walkthroughs, I can't tell you how many times I'm doing walkthroughs with principals and sitting, and they're called out. Sometimes I'm able to go with them to observe. There was one case at one elementary school, the principal was called out. The counselor had assistance, and there was another student who was having a crisis, so I took that student and worked with that student. And then when that crisis was rectified, then I went and helped and worked with the counselor while the principal was working with someone else. So it's just time that we need to have our counselors to work with our students, to work with our staffs, but also allow our principals to get in there and impact the instructional core. Just also quickly for the counselors, it says that counselors identify students with specific problems such as threatening for self-harm or others, provide short-term assistance, work with teachers and students' families, then pair students with doctors, psychologists, therapists who can address deeper issues. That's on top of all of their regular duties, which include academic advising, educating school staff and students about bullying, vaping, social media, and other issues such as monitoring the school climate, addressing discipline issues, and handling other crises such as suicides and other deaths. So you get the idea about the importance of the counselors. The transition coach would be split across the middle school, and what that would look like, it's really looking at someone who can help transition students back into the classroom that have experienced mental health, emotional issues, hospitalizations, and then you also have students returning from concussions. Because when a student comes back, the crisis isn't over. And it's really not only working with that student, it's working with all the teachers, working with all the families, working with all of the psychologists, the doctors, and the support systems. So looking at that, for example, and I asked the middle schools from some data, principals. So in the past year, both middle schools have supported approximately 62 students through a variety of mental health concerns and hospitalizations. This includes safety assessments, parent meetings, outside referrals for families, academic tutoring responsibility, transition back to school, and providing the social emotional support. So that's for that piece. Right now, we have principals, some of the assistant principals, but our current counselors are doing that. But they are straight out in terms of helping students on 504s, special educations, academic counseling, transitioning students from 5th to 6th grade, 8th to 9th grade, and so forth. The dropout prevention piece and the computer science, those are at the high school. So currently we have a 0.6 FTE teacher in the technology department, so we would increase that staff person to a 1.0 FTE, and the goal would have certain sections on, and again, this is for all students, computer science and personal finance. It was interesting that both the high school and Stephen Imbush noted this, and I noticed it in my entry plan. Numerous students found the importance of personal finance and felt that every student should take a personal finance course sometime in their high school career. And I commend them for recognizing that. So that is the goal with that .4 position. The dropout prevention the work study coordinator. We have a growing need for a more robust work study program that's geared for students who may not intend to go straight to college. We've been running such a program, but it's at a very limited scale. And what these students do is they spend their last semester participating in internship, also taking the math and the English credits that they need, most in the morning. And we're hearing from students, from parents, and also NEASC that this should be more of a priority. The PAC is also planning to run an information night for parents of students who are pursuing a more non-college track in high school. We're looking at this could be a possibility that can morph into a night school, providing opportunities not only for students in our district, but other districts as well, be self-sustaining, and also adults as well that are looking to get their GEDs. So that is what we're looking at in terms of that work-study coordinator. So when you look at all of those positions, along with if we were to commit $100,000, that would reduce the tuition from $1,800, right, Mike, to $1,400.
Right.
For families for a tuition decrease. So those total new positions would be $520,000. Again, you look at the Medicaid and the special ed reduction and the Medicaid tuition. You look at the total new positions, but that's an increase of 4.8%, and that's our gap of $690,456. I also just quickly want to mention, what are we doing? Because the school, we need to do our part as well. We can't just come to the town and say, hey, give us 4.8 and we're done. We need to do our due diligence as well, and we recognize that we need to provide efficiencies, and we started doing just that. We just had a meeting last week, a budget meeting, looking at fees across the board, to see what could that bring in, and looking at that could bring in a possible $100,000, for example. We're actually doing a charter school audit, a lot of work on that. We've noticed, and I have to commend Nancy Gallivan, has been noticing, even a discrepancy from the DESE reportings to how many students we have in our charter schools, and that's money. And so we're conducting an audit and getting residencies from all of our students in the charter schools to take a closer look at that, to see, make sure that our numbers match, and if they don't, why is that? And then we're also looking, closely following, which will be coming up, attrition. And that may play into it as well. So those are just some of those, but we recognize that we need to do our part as well to determine, what efficiencies we can provide to help this budget gap.
Thank you. I can actually ask the first couple of questions. Going to the comprehensive sheet.
Yes.
We know that Section A is what you're asking the town to support, but the other categories is pretty much level funded other than the Medicare reimbursement. How confident are you that those numbers are going to come in the same?
Well, if we're starting from the bottom, the grants, we level fund those because they pretty much have come in. MECO has come in less, but that's because our enrollment dropped, so we're looking at that. Title IV, that's more of our safe and secure schools, that came in a little lower. We're hoping that perhaps with the grants, with our Student Opportunity Act and looking at how they're targeting our low-income students, that we may see a little bit, but you're talking maybe in the grants a couple $1,000s. So those are pretty much level. In total, with our Student Opportunity Act, our town doesn't benefit as much. I mean, we're getting $30 per student, $107,000 in total. Our charge for that is to close the gaps. That's where they want. They want very targeted. We're a short form district because we're not getting over 1.5 million. So we're a short form district, so we really know where we're going to target this, and we're looking at our English learner population.
And then the offsets of fees and tuitions?
Yeah, we're not looking, right? We're looking
There's
at.
there's nothing alarming about it, but there's nothing really unusual as well on the positive side. So pretty much status
I'm
quo.
looking more on the negative side of what's the potential things to be going down, which means you could be in a deeper hole.
Yeah, no.
No, I don't see it. Short answer is no.
In circuit breaker, we've estimated that
Right.
to come in, so,
Right.
as you,
Ready?
Yep.
Second question is on the 4.8 increase with the 2 elementary school counselors. Are there currently 6? So there are basically 6 full-time and they're dancing between these buildings?
1.5, if you.
Right, but I mean, you've got 4 schools, so it's
So we
one
would-
full-time and 2 part-time, or,
Right now, we have 1 full and 2. So what it would do is it would allow 2 full-time at each of the buildings.
right, but I mean, the personnel themselves, are there 4 full-time and 4 part-time?
Oh, they're all-
Or is it 6 people rotating?
No, they're full-time. So that person, for example, from Boyden and OPR, that 1.0 splits her time. So might be there on Mondays and Wednesdays, so if a student's in crisis,
Okay.
they have to, the other people will handle it, you know, but cannot develop that connection with that student. They have to wait till they
So
come
you're
back
actually
on
looking
Wednesday.
at 2 new hires to
Yes,
make
yep,
that-
yep. So that's
Okay.
60 apiece,
All right.
not 120.
My other is on the projected enrollment. I don't see any staffing changes in the elementary school for classroom, but there's no comparison for the middle schools or high schools. Do you see potentials for changes there?
No,
the-
for
these-
increase in classes, classroom teachers?
Yeah.
No, what we're really trying to do and work on, and I think this is coming to school committee as well, is not seeing an increase and really trying to make do with what we have. We recognize that. And so if our kindergarten enrollment is going up, taking a look at the other classrooms and figuring out what we can do and where we can make that shift.
Okay. Anybody else? Ally first.
No? All right. Anyone can interrupt if you have a question, because I have about 5 or 6. In the past, I think last year when I attended the school committee budget meetings, and you briefly talked about this, the new state regulations for English as a second language learners, we've jumped that kind of baseline. Like you said, there's over 100, so we have a pack. So what other financial pieces are now a requirement? We have a lot in here that are, obviously, it seems must needed. It's amazing how many languages we're serving. But what are the financial, like, must requirements from the state now that we've kind of have such an increase?
They don't have a certain amount. There's been like this rumor that, you know, once you hit, 145, you have to hire an EL coordinator. That's not true. A lot of districts, that's what they're doing when they get to a certain point. What the state is saying is that this is all you have to do. This is what you have to do. You have to look at accountability. You need to make sure that your number of hours when you have a newcomer, the newcomer must, you have to, this is the recommended amount that you need to service this student. And the staff that we have, it's very, very difficult, and we're not capable of being able to provide those services in the way that we need. The data reporting, the benchmarking, our preschool teachers, so they don't say, okay, you have to spend X amount, you have to hire X amount.
So it's kind of
They
how
say,
to,
"This
it's
is
hard
what
to
you have."
pinpoint.
It's a mandate almost, and you figure out how you
Right, so it's kind of hard to wrap a number around that to say what it is costing us as a district now that we have so many.
We should have an EL tutor at each school, and that's not the case. We just don't.
Are the teachers still having to take mandatory classes?
They took the SEI course, and then that's something as part of our curriculum of professional development. Bill and I have been talking about that. You can jump in, like, Bill, I don't want to leave you out. But one of it, we talk about, okay, we're going to provide these services and support our English learners, but we need to make sure we're supporting the teachers as well to provide them with the tools and the skills. So that is part of the PD, as part of the budget, is to have some targeted, specific.
And that was a state regulation, all teachers complete those courses.
And they
that
have.
continues. So
And that continues.
Teachers who teach students, EL students, especially level 1, level 2, are still required to have the SEI endorsement. And teachers who are relicensing, either from initial or professional or continued professional licensure, cannot get that professional licensure without the SEI endorsement as well.
So, I mean, ESL, kind of my point too, is it's hard to put that number of what now that is increased in our school baseline budget, but it also impacts many areas. So not only are we looking that we need some new hire positions, but it's also in our curriculum or professional development of our teachers, that is a piece of it too. Special education, I'm sure.
Well, I
It
was
is a
gonna-
piece of special education as well.
And not only that, I think translation services, interpreter services, sort of like costs that you don't think of, but, you know, to translate an IEP document for an EL student,
Yeah.
it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, our translation line item has gone up.
Yeah. Private billing, you mentioned out-of-district schools, private billing for the Medicaid are on hold. So I would assume some of these out-of-district placements maybe are more complex special education with many more medical needs as well. When an out-of-district placement, when they bill Medicaid, where's that reimbursement going to? So if, we're paying the out-of-district tuition to that school, they can't charge the Medicaid now. I'm sure there's many servicings that they do qualify because it's medical necessity, probably not as much educational. So where's that money going back to if they're on hold?
If they're not,
They're just not
they're just not billing. So we're not getting the money.
Going back.
Okay, so normally it would come back to us,
Yes.
but those
Yes.
out-of-districts have been told to
So
wait.
some of them, we're receiving letters. We're starting to receive letters from certain out-of-districts, some schools that said, hey, we're putting this on hold until we get training. We've asked the state for training. We're not getting it, we're not getting the training that we need, so we're going to wait. So that's
Is
part of that
a good
impact.
amount of that amount coming from those out-of-district places, not as much as our in-school programs?
That's hard to tell. It's
Okay.
hard to disaggregate, how much is coming from private, how much is coming from.
It's a meaningful event, so put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, familiarity with special education. Full-day kindergarten, 15,000 for our low income. Are we using free, kind of that baseline of children who are eligible for, free busing and free lunching? Is that, those are the students that are?
That's where we're starting.
Okay, so that's what we had been working on. We have a lot of big gaps. I was on the full-day kindergarten task force. We were hoping for a 3-year plan for that to be moved in. So 7 years, I would like to see it continue going, but it is difficult with such a large gap in the budget between our base budget and kind of some of our real district needs. The preschool tuition got increased for next year, but that's not financially this year, right?
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so that was approved for next year as we look over. And charter school attendance, up, down? Where are we at with that?
Well, we're looking at that. What we're trying to do is, for the sake of transparency, that what we're trying to do is that get the residency, which we have now, of all the students that are in charter schools, and just confirming residency. Because what tends to happen, through no one's fault, that, let's say a student goes to, from Walpole, a Walpole resident, attends charter school in grade 2, and then they move.
And we don't require yearly.
If the charter school, maybe through, things slip through the cracks, if they're not following that child, right, the child moves to another town, so that's what we're in the process of doing. So now we're checking residency of any student that's in a charter school. We have finally been able to secure all the residencies of all the children in Walpole attending charter school, and then determining are there discrepancies, and if there are, why is that, and what impact? And as of today, we do have Mary Portelli's up there working on it right now. She was just working on it, and she said, I found one. So she's just started going through the list.
Which actually popped my brain for one more thought on full-day kindergarten. If we are servicing more of the low-income students, I thought that we were going to get a point of reimbursement because we had more FTEs for the lower-income students, that it would hopefully get a larger reimbursement for the state.
Not the case.
Not the
Checked
case,
on that
okay.
one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I know we had discussed that in the past. 2 cents middle school counselors, I think it's needed. I think those relationships you build, I think when you build that strong social emotional foundation, it leads the way for successful learning in the middle school and high school without as much intervention. Secondary to that, because those are our at-risk students that are seeking that out, the train coach transition and the dropout, I have siblings and things that work in high school, and they said both high schools are creating programs. And I guess when you talk to people, I don't think they realize it as much. Students that are no longer able to attend a regular school with mental health, maybe they had a hospitalization, they try to get back to school. Schools are developing classrooms to help them transition. It's not successful, and now they're at home doing online programming only and doing their education through their local public schools, but online, but they're no longer at the building. To me, it's like there's a point that you have to help these students get back into something that's regular. And if they're not able to get back into their middle school in a way that's successful, or back into their high school in a way that's successful, even part-time, how are we going to ask these students to go to college? How are we going to ask these students to then successfully work in a workplace? Because there's a shift and there's an isolation of students in the high school level who are now doing programming at home through many of our communities to obtain their high school degrees. And I guess people don't realize how many students are not attending school and doing this program kind of in isolation. And it worries me. Where are these students going to be? Because how do you get to college? How do you get a job? You have to be able to function within society and people. So I think starting at the elementary level and helping them through is a good way to go after it.
So, on the subject of transitioning students, you did say that there were 62 students who transitioned last year. Was that in the middle school? Because you're looking for specifically a middle school transition
that was
coach?
middle school.
So just in our two middle
Just
schools?
in the past year.
In 1 year, in our two middle schools, 62 students who were out of school for some reason, physical or mental health or some other crisis, and then had to work their way back in.
Yes.
So in the high school, do we have a transition guidance
We do.
counselor?
We
One?
do. Mhm.
And in the elementary schools?
No.
No.
That's hence the need for the.
So you just need counseling at all levels, in all areas, but clearly in the middle school, if you had 62 students, that's tough.
Yes.
In the budget charts here that you presented, could you help explain to me the total fiscal year 20 positions added? I know that's part of the FTE sheet we'll get at our next meeting, but I'm just trying to wrap my head. Is this for the current fiscal year 20?
This is current.
But just in broad strokes?
Yeah, I could give you an example. We had to hire a preschool teacher because the law, once you hit a certain number of special education students, because that's what the preschool is designed for, you have to hire, is it a 15, 8 to 7?
Yeah, preschool classrooms are capped at 15,
Right.
where you have 8 typical peers and 7 IEPs. So you cannot go over that cap, and we were threatening to go over that cap as we approached September of this year.
So we had to hire a preschool teacher, and then along with that, you have to hire an ESP. So
And what's an ESP again?
Oh, sorry, educational support professional. It's like a teacher aide, but they're really in there in the classrooms. They work with the students all the time, either 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-3, or an entire class.
And there are other instances like that of needing a teacher in this current fiscal year beyond what was budgeted.
Right,
Gets you-
yes. Yeah, kindergarten enrollment spiked at Old Post Road. They would have had, 25 kindergartners in each class.
Gotcha.
So we had to do that in June, late
Gotcha.
June.
Okay, so that was the fiscal year 20 positions. And then for the Medicaid reimbursements, or the decline in Medicaid reimbursements, if I understand this correctly, is this a MassHealth policy change, or is it a trickle-down effect from a broader federal change? Because I know that there's also a change towards block grants in Medicare and Medicaid reimbursements at the federal level for all healthcare spending. And I'm just wondering if this is part of that, or is it just this a Massachusetts MassHealth change?
You want me to take it?
Yeah, you want to take that because it's
Yeah.
It's a little bit
I
because
view it
it-
as a MassHealth process and procedure issue, and I think basically they've overhauled what their expectations are for school personnel, and that overhaul hasn't come with a lot of clarity. So I think that's why you're seeing out-of-district schools being advised to stop billing for the moment. Some districts have walked away from Medicaid altogether. I think the canceled trainings are a sign of that non-clarity that we were scheduled, that were rolled out for this month and now have been canceled. So I think folks are waiting to get some clarity from MassHealth. So I think it's more of a MassHealth than a larger sort of block grant issue.
Got it.
And it's really logistical sort of process procedure, non-clarity.
Got it. So, if I understand this correctly, and excuse me if I'm jumping around, the out-of-district private sped schools that are, waiting to reimburse until they get clarity and training from the state, that's tied in with this Medicaid reimbursement budget line item. Separate from that, there's a special education increase. And is that just in terms of number of students doing
out-of-district
services?
tuitions.
That's a
Yeah.
different
It's a
circumstance.
different circumstance. I just wanted to.
And in terms of the Medicaid, other districts may be walking away. We can't afford to walk away. We need to claim what we can claim. So we're trying to say we can hopefully claim 250,000 out of this. And then moving forward, we're going to need to budget that amount. We'll be able to budget that moving forward, but
I
it's
think
just going to.
we've pushed forward doing what we can do with the knowledge that we have, but we are also waiting for more clarity as to ultimately what this is going to look like.
Nancy?
Just a couple of things from a upstairs person's point of view. The way it makes sense to me is, we have two really big, unusual expenditures when it comes to the special ed budget for next year. There's always a lot of positive and negative kinds of changes, but to have it come in the number around 600,000 makes this year extremely unusual. And the Medicaid piece of it, part of it is a Massachusetts only requirement that says families have to sign off in order for the school to bill. So that's the piece that we're trying to change through our governor or our legislature. I think it's more the governor, but we're working at both levels because that is not a Medicaid requirement, that's a Massachusetts requirement. And then the other piece is the special ed schools who had been billing for Medicaid and are feeling less certain that they're going to be able to do that, are passing their costs down to us. It's not that that they're not getting the reimbursement. We're paying the cost because everything flows downhill to the local government in the end.
I see. So even though it's two budget line items, they're kind of drawing from, to some extent, one problem.
It's two separate problems, yes. The Medicaid kind of hits both, but we always hear, as the year goes along, about the positives and negatives in the special education budget. We always, as we prepare our budget for next year, make them go through with a fine-tooth comb the budget. It's just to have a growth problem in the $600,000 range just puts this into a different category than what we see almost ever.
It's been a great exercise for me in my first year. You never see this.
Quick question on the Medicare reimbursement. We always get the money the year following, so this year's expenses have to get submitted,
Yes.
and then the state turns around and releases that money in August, because it always ends up in our free cash. So I'm just trying to, okay, so as long as you can get those forms in on time for June 30th, you'll see the money within 60 days or so, and it falls to free cash? Is that how it works, Marilyn?
It'll go to free.
It has to come in before June 30th
It has to come in before June, okay, so,
to fall to free cash.
okay. So-
It does.
And that's a guessing game we're playing. We're not sure how much.
We don't know what the-
Right.
When is it gonna be on time? Is it not
Okay.
gonna be?
We're just hoping for 250. That's our.
Alrighty. Yes.
Yeah. Can you bill for those students that are in charter schools that the charter schools aren't billing for to get your reimbursement?
Those-
If they're making you pay?
It's not charter,
Private
it's the
schools.
private schools,
Private
yeah,
schools.
the
Whatever.
out-of-district
Do you bill for
placements.
those?
No, because we're not,
So
providing the
out-of-district
services.
schools bill for services that they render.
They
And-
provide.
Yeah, and then we reap the benefits of that, and in exchange, that service is built into the tuition.
Right.
So we get the benefits of their billing. Their overarching state organization has advised all of the out-of-district schools to freeze their billing until some clarity comes down as to what's
Eventually
happening.
they will bill?
I would think so, but I don't know what they're
we
looking,
get training.
Yeah.
right? I don't know what they're looking
Life's
for.
not, but it just seems.
Yeah, I think we're all looking for better clarity with it. We've made our decision as a district internally in district to bill as much as we can with the knowledge that we have. They've made a decision to stop billing altogether, and that's the way it is.
I don't mean to keep hogging time. I just have two, maybe three things. One, around, at the very beginning of the presentation, around enrollment projections. This is more of a comment than a question. But I see a lot of folks, as we talk about ongoing development in town, for me, it always comes back to housing. Everyone's worried about development and 40Bs and whatnot. There's chatter about the impact on the schools. And there is this narrow point that you all say, and it's absolutely true, it's what I say too, about, well, most of these are 1 and 2 bedrooms. There's very few 3 bedrooms, and we think the impact on the schools is minimal. But there is, I think, a broader even point we could make, we being both the schools but also the finance committee, in saying, and I just want to make sure I get this correct in my commentary, there's a long-term, multi-decade kind of slight decline in enrollment. Am I wrong? And so, in terms of the physical capacity of the schools, to say, to put aside the personnel and goods and services budgets, but just in terms of the structural capacity, to me, it doesn't seem like an issue. So I just wanted to kind of affirm the points you made before, that the ongoing development in this town, given the long-term declines in enrollment, should enrollment peak up, won't overwhelm our structural capacity. That's just my point of view. That's one thing I wanted to say. And then my question, and I'll finish, is in your presentation, you highlighted the English language learners, the growing racial diversity in the school system, and this was a great presentation. And then on slide 7, you talk about fiscal year 2021 and providing resources. You talk about achievement gaps. That's part of the Student Opportunity Act and the extra 100-something thousand you're getting. Talk about social emotional well-being. That's great in terms of the 2 elementary school counselors. So all in favor of that 4% budget, me personally. But then this third point in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I've just heard, and I have no expertise in this at all, I've just heard chatter about, and I believe the terminology, maybe I'm wrong here, but it's like cultural competency training for educators.
Implicit bias, cultural
Implicit bias
competence.
training
competency.
for, again, going towards this diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where is that in the budget?
Great question. So, I'm going to include Bill in this with cultural competency, because maybe you can talk about what we've been doing this year and what we hope to continue, and I can jump in as well.
Yeah, and I was just at a conference on Friday,
Perfect
hosted by an
timing.
organization of many towns, and 6 of the presenters were a panel who had assistant superintendents whose position was equity, inclusion, and cultural efficiency. So you're right. I mean, that is the focus of a lot of communities in town. While we're not advocating for a position here, that is absolutely a focus for us this year. I was joined by Jacinia Castro, one of our staff members at that conference. We had training, actually someone attended our training, for all of our staff at the beginning of this year, for all of our new staff around equity and inclusion, and then we provided an optional PD for all of staff who wanted to volunteer. I'm forgetting the name of it.
Understanding identity.
Understanding identities, thank you. So it is a huge area of focus for us, and it's a continued conversation we're having. Next year we'll be starting work and curriculum with our staff, understanding what we call difficult conversations, which is a curriculum again for our staff and can extend to our students in future years. So there's on our radar. It's something that's, I would say, rooted in our strategic plan. But as of today, we're not requesting additional staff.
The other point is looking at our resources, our literature, that, our literature reflects the diversity of our community. So in terms of purchasing novels and looking at the reading program for our elementary schools, of purchasing the curriculum that reflects that diversity.
Thank you.
Okay. Mark? I have a couple questions. You mentioned this charter, and I'm a little confused. So you mentioned like if a student started from Walpole, they left Walpole, they still go to the charter school.
Whatever.
Has the charter school been billing Walpole?
Well, that's what we're looking at. We're trying to figure out when the student's unenrolled. Like, for example, if the student unenrolls and we find out they move in December, who's responsible for that? Are we on the hook for the whole year, or are we on the hook for only part of the year? If they move in September, they usually, a lot of times you do the October 1st sims. In special education, you have like in April, correct, date for certain.
April 1st is a big date for students moving in and out of your district, yeah, as far as fiscal responsibility.
So that's what we need to take a look at.
Well, I guess I don't understand. If they're not a resident of Walpole anymore, why is Walpole paying anything to the charter school?
We don't know. We have to look. We're just trying to figure out why does the state, DESE might say, you have, I don't know, like 50 students, but we're claiming 48. Where are those two students? Because if they don't let the town know, like, so I'm just using Foxborough for example, so a student's Walpole, then all of a sudden moves to Foxborough, the charter school may not realize that the student moved to Foxborough. The family is not letting the school know that they moved to Foxborough that part of the year, so no one would know.
I mean, again, it just seems to me kind of common sense, isn't
It would.
Someone in administration, you look at the list of
Yeah.
who's moved out of town and say,
Yeah.
gee, the Joneses aren't here anymore.
Right.
Why are we paying for the tuition for the?
Right, and we've had some difficulty getting residency from one of the charter schools, and we were just able legally to get it
Okay.
released.
The other question I have is you mentioned
Nancy, did you
about
have a
that the
comment?
state requires the billing, that the parents sign off on it in
For
order for us.
Medicaid?
I mean, why aren't we just having the parents sign when they do the paperwork up front? I don't understand why we would be
They-
not getting the
So
signatures.
prior to this year, if a parent signed once, that would roll for subsequent years. Going into this year, we were mandated on getting every parent to sign again, and that has been met with some difficulty.
What would be difficult about it?
There are some parents who don't sign, and we're not really sure why.
I mean, if they don't sign, I don't know, am I being harsh here? But if they don't sign, it'd be like, well, why would we send your child then if you don't sign? I mean, I guess I just don't understand why we're incurring liability just because they've decided they don't want to sign.
Well, we provide the service either way,
Yep,
because it's a
right.
special ed service. We're mandated to provide the service. We're attempting to get their consent to bill Medicaid. They can give it, or they don't have to give it, and we can't mandate them to give it. And the problem, and that used to roll in the past, so it really wasn't an issue. We weren't chasing every parent every year, but this year we had to get all signatures again, starting from scratch, basically.
Yeah. The other question I have, I'm just kind of jumping
You
around.
have a point about charter schools, I think Nancy, did you?
Yeah, it seems to me like what has happened in the past with all towns, with most charter schools, is they send the bill, the town pays it. And we started looking this year at the number of kids, which has been growing, and said, let's figure out why kids are going to schools other than our schools, to see if there's things that we could do better or differently to have them want to stay here. But also to not just pay a bill because it says there's X number of students. We wanted to be able to document that, yeah, these are Walpole residents going to Tri-County is the other one.
Right,
Because
but,
when
okay.
you look at the numbers, it's a lot of money that's going out that way. And there was no accountability until we started pushing for it. And they did get pushback from some of the charter schools saying, no, we don't give out residencies. But in fact, they got a legal opinion from the DESE, and they were allowed to push for it. It just was something that districts haven't been doing, and we
Okay,
decided.
so I guess maybe a note for the town administrator. I'd like to, remember the finance committee. I'd like to know, are there other billing situations that the town, similar to this, the town's paying the bills, and we don't really know if we should be paying the bill or not.
We're looking into both.
No, I understand what you're doing, and I don't mean to
School-related
beat up,
ones.
and I'm not blaming people, but it just kind of jumps out at you to
I
say.
just want to say, I don't want.
Oh, there, Jim, you're there. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here.
I'm telling you, don't, and I'm short-staffed in our department. This is a school issue. They're chasing it down. I can tell you, there's not really any issues that we're aware of on our end. When you say, I want the town administrator to do that, I'm just saying, I'm not gonna do it right now.
And not only that, any bill that comes in is signed off by a department head verifying that this bill is accurate
We don't have
when it
that.
comes to our office,
Uh-huh.
to get paid out.
Okay. The other question I have on the special education, so I've noticed basically over the 2 years, it's gone up by almost 90%. Right, when I look at the amounts here, 19 was 1,050,000, now it's 1,994,000. This is the tuition private schools.
Oh, tuition.
And I'm just wondering, what's driving this huge growth? I understand there's billing issues, but do we have more students? Have the schools gotten more expensive?
Well, a piece of our increase this year is a number of schools seeking, or are planning around schools who are seeking increases from the state. So that is a piece of what's going on this year. To elaborate on what's going on this year, every year there's movement on the out-of-district tuition line and caseload line. Kids go on. While I think our programs here in district are really good, there are some kids whose needs are beyond the scope of our district, and we access out-of-district schools. The difference this year is, in most years, you have kids who subsequently come off. They either graduate or they turn 22 when our obligation ends. This year, there just happens to not be that scenario. So we have kids going on that we're planning for this coming fiscal year, but we don't have kids who are coming off to mitigate that. So that's a little bit unusual.
Bridget, also, aren't the numbers in these backup sheets also net of reimbursements like Medicare?
The backups,
Yeah, so like
Yeah.
under the special ed where we've got the line item budgets, that current year that we're in now of $1.6 million, that was net of the reimbursement that we already applied.
that's right.
So the $1,994,000 is net of $250 instead of the $550 that was net of this year. So that's the $300,000 jump you see. The numbers in the backup here are net numbers of the Medicare reimbursement.
It's actually circuit breakers net in there.
That's a circuit
Yeah.
breaker.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'm just looking at this sheet here.
Right.
And so there's a roughly $900,000 jump over 2 years.
Right.
So it's based on
Growing
more
tuition.
students.
More students,
Right.
plus the
Higher
drop in
needs.
reimbursement. Plus the drop in reimbursement.
Are other towns, I guess what I'm wondering is Walpole considered like, gee, this is the town you want to move into if you have a special, and I feel sensitive saying this, I'm not trying to tell people not to
Mark?
come or something, but is this kind of like across the school districts, like you mentioned, English as a second language? Are all towns experiencing this? Is it just Walpole that's experiencing this kind of growth?
Were you taking into account, I know the private school number has those big jumps. The line below at 43 has a reduction of 78,000. Those are also out-of-district schools.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, but I guess just in general, for the Walpole schools, with this English as a second language, with this increased cost that you're seeing now for special education and the charter schools, I'm just curious, is this unique to Walpole? Is this generally across?
I think because we
Other
have less than
towns?
1% of our students are out of district, correct?
Yeah, I think the
Maybe we
caseload
would-
now and sheer number of kids
Is less.
is far fewer than, I think, going back a number of years. my understanding. I've only been here 3 years, but
Uh-huh.
the sheer number of kids on the caseload is lower than what it had been in previous years.
But they're more severe in their needs for
Some-
the outplacement.
Yeah, I think one student who may make a significant move to say, who goes to school just during the day, but then maybe moves to a school when they turn 18 or when they turn to a young adult into a residential, that's an enormous cost difference for one student. So I think it does skew the number a little bit when that happens. And I don't want to go into specifics of individual kids, but there are wild swings in this line that can happen from year to year.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'm not opposed to any of it. I'm just trying to, like, when I talk to some of the people, because, it's like, Walpole's changing. Look at just the sheer race equation over the 10 years. Look at what the schools are now facing. The chief of police, I was struck the other night when he mentions before with a mental health issue, you put him in cuffs, you dropped him off in the jail and that was it. Now they're doing things differently. So I'm just trying to grasp my head around to tell people the whole town has changed. And the other thing, last question is, with these counselors, transition coach, dropout prevention, these will be full-time positions. Are there, and I'm just asking this, are there companies that you can hire consultants that would come in? Because I look at the student load, and it's fairly constant, 260 to 280, the grades don't change that much, and these needs will change depending on what you need to do. So I'm wondering, does it give you flexibility to use consultants being overseen by your staff versus hiring a staffer that, I do this and the student load?
It's a
I'm
good
asking from a
question.
practical standpoint.
No, it's a good question, because the consultants, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, the consultants we use to help work with the staff, right? To give them the tools and the skills, but you also need those counselors to work with the actual students and the families and the therapists and, that whole wraparound support that you need. But it's almost like you need both pieces, because if you have the support for the students, but you're not training the staff, and the staff don't have the tools and skills, like I was talking about with Ally with the EL. You want to provide the EL supports to provide the opportunities for those students, but at the same time, who's supporting the teachers? So you need to continue to do a piece of both. So we have that. We have that as part of the budget when you have the consulting line item, and that's what we use.
That is a piece of the special ed consulting line item. We do have a consultant neuropsychologist, and we ask her to evaluate and contribute to any cases that are becoming more significant, do have the question of out of district. She does evaluate kids to see what is possible, what's in the best interest of the kid. Could it be in district, or does it really need to be out of district? And she does do trainings for our staff. She was here at the all-district training last month. So we do bring in those consultants to help us with decision-making around student needs.
Then with the person that's working with the teachers, the families, it'd be pretty disruptive to, a consultant is left, here's a new consultant.
Exactly. You want to have consistency, and you need to create a bond with these students, and making sure that you've created psychological safety.
I'm all set, thanks, Mark.
Ally?
Mark, I'm going to respond back on the special education, but do not take it personally at all.
Okay.
As a parent of a special needs child who went through the Walpole system till 22, when you are a parent raising a child with special needs, you cannot understand what another parent goes through with their child with special needs. They are all so unique. I can look at a parent who has a child with severe autism, and I can say, I cannot even imagine how difficult it is. Parents of kids with special needs, they do talk to each other. What is your town servicing? Is this a good town? I'm thinking about moving from Mansfield. How's their special education department? There is a network, and they want to know that their kids are going into a school district with the best services. Do I think Walpole's unique that we have an influx as people are moving into Walpole to get into our special education? No. I mean, because I think other towns see it too. The kids who are the out of district, which is such a small percentage of our students, those are our most complex kids. The town has done everything they could to keep them in district, and you can't even imagine the complexity of their medical needs and their educational needs. And it is not something in the typical classroom you can serve. I know at Byrd Middle School currently this year, our Byrd Middle School, which is our smaller school and our school in most need, has one of our largest special education program. How many kids are in Byrd right now?
Just in special ed?
Yes. In the pull-out classroom. It's a high number.
Oh, it's 20.
If you saw the size of the classroom and you saw the range of students and what those teachers are trying to do, it is amazing. And that's our school that needs our most help physically in itself. So special education, it's gonna go up and down. And the jumps don't really surprise me because the town works really hard. I can tell you, I have left many IEP meetings, which is what you have to do, which is our legal document that parents have to follow, yelling at some of our educators. And I will say, and putting down a very firm line of what I'm going to sign off on and what I absolutely will not sign off on. The town works hard to work with families and provide the servicing that they know they can, and parents have to give a little way too. But special education, being that it's a federal mandate and we're not getting the reimbursement that is set by the federal mandate, and it's hard for our local schools, but it's not unique to Walpole. It's every school district.
Sean?
And just from personal experience working in a school district, it is not unique to Walpole. I can speak to both of the concerns that Dr. Goff raised with special needs students. We've had, for us, a good year this past year, where we did have a couple of move-outs that helped the budget line. But as soon as a new student moves in and you have to provide $125,000 worth of services, it's a lot of change that you have to do to the budget. The same thing with English language learners. When the students pull in, we have one teacher for not as many students, but just working with that process and then trying to get teachers supported in the classroom is a struggle. And we're just down the road in Rentham, so we're seeing it everywhere. But I just a couple of questions. I just want to go back to the enrollments document that you had shared, and just confirming. So all of the ones highlighted in green, those are down a classroom compared to where they are for this current fiscal year.
Let me find that document. Might need my computer.
Can you just use this?
Oh, that would be great. I don't know if it was taken. I might have taken it out because I just updated it. Oh, thanks. Yeah, so for example, 2021. So for example, yeah, we have to, for example, the yellow is the ones that we kind of have to watch for Old Post Road. Like right now, it said 61. I just actually, so the next time we come, you'll get an updated one. This weekend, I went through all the registrations and all the pre-reg as well. So for example, Old Post Road now, they're up to 80 kindergarten enrollments. So again, that was a watch. If it went down, then you know, right, you have to watch to see if you need to add a teacher. You take a look at another one and say, okay, we've got 92 in first grade. If that number goes down and people unenroll, then, we might be able to shift a teacher over. So it's always looking at where you can create those efficiencies and where you can make the shift. You tend to have obviously a little bit of a lower class size of 22, 23 in the lower grades, and then you can get 24, 25 if you need be in grades 4 and 5. But you can see Boyden School is our least population, so to Andrew's point, if they're able to, when they're able to build, or if they're able to build that development, looking at what type of impact that would have. But that's got a very low kindergarten number coming in right now.
Does the strategic plan or the school councils provide guidance on enrollment, like recommendations for
The school,
enrollment? And
school
what
councils will talk about where they see those efficiencies might happen. If you're going to, it's not as, you don't have as much input probably on the middle and the high school, because as you know, when you get to the middle school, You can't just
Right.
add one teacher, you have to add a whole team. You have to add a social studies, a science, and English, and a math. So it's really looking at these numbers, and they swing, because depending on the way your class is, if you have a different level math class, or you only have so many sections of French, those are gonna swing your numbers. Where these students, don't change for classes until they get up into the, the higher grades. So that's what makes it a little bit more difficult. And you take a look, and then you also look at the individual needs of the students in the classrooms, and that's where you try to push in some support where an ESB might be.
Thank you. And is the preschool tuition, is that being collected, the increase collected in this next year, the 2021 school year?
Next year.
So we will be
Phased
collecting
in.
next year,
Okay.
yeah.
And is the increase reflected in the budget? Like, I noticed it's the same amount you expect to collect, I guess, from FY20 as opposed to 21.
Yeah, I mean, we could bump it up to reflect a little bit of the increase that's there, yeah.
I mean, 5% is not a ton, but there is some.
But we're also talking about other fees too, so once.
Well, the fee discussion's much
committee votes,
larger.
Then we'll reflect you.
Okay. And I just wanted to, again, throw some support behind the extra counselors, especially for the elementary. I've seen firsthand just what additional staff on site can do to help students access learning. And it's not a trickle down, I mean, it's a building up throughout the course of the student's career. The more access they have, especially in their more formative years, the more relationships they spend, the more trust they have with the school staff, that if, as they grow up and they're able to hopefully be transitioned to handling things more on their own, they know who to go to and where to find that help in the schools. And if, it can start and then build up over time, the students can be well supported, and being able to have, that person that you can go to if you are having a bad day can be really, really helpful.
Kathleen hasn't spoken.
I have one question and then one comment. The PE, we need an additional wellness PE. I know we've asked this before, but is there any use in pushing back again to get credit for other activities? You're a varsity athlete, you're a band, marching
State
band.
says no.
And nobody else in the state is doing that.
Not anymore. Not anymore. It was a practice years ago with the new graduation.
Performance.
Is not recognized.
Okay. And then my other comment is, when you say what's the school doing, I would just be careful with saying you're looking at fees. I know you're looking at fees.
You have to look at them.
I get that, but that's really what families are doing. It falls down, so families are in general supportive of the schools because they've experience with schools, they've got children here, but that's really, the families are giving a little bit more. I appreciate the charter school audit, but that just sort of hit me the wrong way, and if it hits me the wrong way and I'm all in for the schools, it's gonna hit others too.
That perplexed me, though. If the student moved out of Walpole and we're paying the charter school fee, why would that offend you that
No,
another town should be picking it up?
No. They said what is the school doing? We're looking at fees.
Oh, okay.
So in other words, parking fee could go up, athletic
Right,
fee,
right.
enrichment could go up, all those things.
Okay.
And parents
I
are the
thought you were
ones that-
saying you were taking offense to us trying
No,
to,
no,
like,
no,
make
no.
sure that if Walpole's paying for charter school, that they are still a resident of charter
No.
school.
No, I'm all for that.
Lisa?
Yes. Through you, I first want to completely support what Sean said about the investment in counseling at the elementary school level. I think that's enormously important for the success of the student later on through school, and pragmatically, it could eventually be a cost savings. I mean, we're not doing it for that reason, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, but absolutely, if you can launch students with good social emotional support from a very early age, that's only going to help us all with, future students and future budgets. And then I would add to that it's quite similar with the English language learners, that I would call English as a foreign language or just English language learners as opposed to the ESL, because for many of these kids, it's not their second language, it's their third or their fourth. But similarly, if we can invest in getting, good English language education for younger kids, that's only going to help their success later and be less costly for us. So I'm very much in support of those tweaks that you've added in the staffing. Just observing, I feel like this 4.8% increase, although it's a big number, it seems to me to be the bare minimum in terms of you had these big gaps that you had to close that landed on you. And then this staffing, it's very well targeted. It's a half a person here and then 2 more people there, and it's tight. I think it's very tight. We had a peppy discussion with the fire department about their long-term staffing goals, and it all made us jump a little bit to imagine what the perfect fire department staffing situation would be and how can we get there. And it just made me think that this is not a lot, 2 extra elementary school counselors, a middle school counselor. There may be a lot of things here that you already cut out before this even reached us, or there may be things that we're going to need to address in a year or 5. And I wondered if you had anything that you just wanted to share about, what other needs are there?
Well, we're going to be starting the visioning discussion of the middle schools because of the middle school building project. So in that discussion, we'll be talking about, what should the middle school look like in terms of anything from what's inside the structure, but also the positions. What are we looking for 21st century learning and education? So that's a piece of it too. That's going to be a large part of it. We talked about, the equity, diversity, and inclusion person. We've talked about the EL. Bill mentioned the EL coordinator. We've looked at, taking a look at future down the line in terms of what is it going to look like in terms of for our students to be able to be competitive in the educational landscape in terms of, digital learning. I think we've made some good gains. We look in terms, we're always trying to grow the music program, right? And try to build that back that we lost so many years ago, that we're able to start getting back. So those are just a few. Am I forgetting anything, Bill, Nancy? I have a...
Bill and I are taking notes. No, seriously, we knew that it's been a while since we've sort of dug into the ins and outs of this budget. And, so we're taking notes on all the questions that have come up tonight. Yeah. And we can come back with some more we have taken all the principals' requests and pared them down. I don't have my notes with me tonight, but, it's from all ends. You want to make sure the average kid just doesn't fall through the cracks, and sometimes that's just giving them a chance to do something that's meaningful for them. So maybe we need another section of robotics, or we had strategic planning last week, and one of the seniors said, you're not offering enough art classes. They for somebody who that's their thing, he said, I wish that you could offer everything that's in the program of studies, for example. So there are a whole bunch of things. We keep adding as we can, and it's always by reallocating positions. But we try to add advanced placement classes, but compared to other districts around here, we're not doing as much. Well, we know that. We don't have as much money as a lot of the districts around here. But yes, there's a list, and we can bring it back to you.
I just have a couple questions. Thank you. This was very informative. On the base budget, I know you said that the health and wellness position, that's a must-have.
Yes.
Is everything else a must-have there?
Yes. In terms of, the school committee, and we all support the $15,000 for the kindergarten and for the free and reduced.
Okay.
So and then the EL, through the Look Act, yeah, in terms of the accountability, that we need to be able to make sure that we do our due diligence in terms of providing the support for those students.
Okay. Can you explain that 15,000 for the kindergarten, free and reduced, a little bit better?
So we've gotten to the point where we've lowered the tuition from 3,800 down to 1,800, so tremendous progress there. What's happened, though, 1,800 is still too much for a small portion of families, those ones that are left that aren't in full-day K or are really struggling. I see it because I'm collecting the money from these families. It's not that many families with a small amount of money, relatively small, 15,000. I think we can cover everyone and make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get in there. So we've reduced it for the average family. They now have a nice reduced amount that they're paying for kindergarten, but it just didn't help that group that's right at the bottom that just
Okay.
can't do it.
Okay, thank you. And then when you come back, it would be very helpful to me if you could list on the 4.8 increase page, if you could list those additional positions in order of your preference.
Okay.
That would be a big help to me on how you would use them. And then I'm all for change as the face of Walpole's changing and the needs we have to, do for all the children coming up and all of that. Are there any programs with all this change that could possibly be sunset, or maybe they're not as popular anymore, and we can reallocate positions and funds to help offset this new change?
Yeah, we can look at that. We can have that.
Thank you.
Question, thanks.
Got Doug first.
I wanted to ask about the full-day tuition, $100,000.
Mhm.
And maybe I'm not remembering this correctly, but I thought some of the full-day was supposed to be built into your operating budget. So so is this 100,000? This is in addition to what's already in there.
Exactly.
Where was that addition? I didn't see that additional money. Where?
So as the town dedicates more money in our appropriated budget, I removed teachers from the revolving account, which is funded from the tuitions, and I moved them into our operating budget. So those teachers are, every year that we dedicate money, I move that proportion back into the operating budget to cover it. So that's how I shifted over. Right now, there's 450,000 of tuition and related salaries in there, and that's the number we're working on. Once we can get that, if we get that to zero, then no more tuition.
I guess a comment to what Mrs. Gallivan had mentioned. She had said that she'd pared down the principal requests. I guess when I was going through some of that detailed backup, I didn't see too many instances where the requested amount was different from the superintendent's recommendation. And one of the things that I'd like to see is where, if they ask for $7,100 for some of the professional development, if you pare that down, I just didn't see too many negative marks there.
Yeah, I don't know that superintendent recommendation line. We do that. We meet with the principals, and then we say they're level funded. So that's where they need to start. But in that, we talk about where we can reallocate, or they might say, we need additional reading materials, like example, for Lucy Calkins. So then that's when we'll go back, we'll talk to Bill, we'll see what we can do in order to try to help them, to get them those supplies. Or they may say, we need X amount for a different line item. So we're constantly shifting, but it's within the bottom line.
Yeah, and I guess for me, when I was going through it, I was just saying everything matches. And I know that that's not the case, because when you go through the higher level thing, you can see that there are changes.
Yeah.
But for me, I like that. I'd like to see that there's a reduction and you clearly did that. It was just, I'm not seeing it the way I.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not reflected in
It's not
that.
reflected in it.
Yeah.
It just, when they put it in, it just
Right.
it automatically,
It's
yeah.
a valid point, we can
It
do
is.
that.
We
Yeah.
can
Well,
do that.
it's much better than last year. I had issues with last year, so. And I guess my final question, very minor, but with the enrollment stats again, it looked like, you're keeping the teachers the same at 84 apiece, but it looked like you were shifting teachers from potentially Fisher and Old Post.
Yeah, that's just
down.
fluid. it was just to try to figure out, okay, if we have 84, we need to stay at 84. We have 82, we need to stay at 82. What are some possibilities? It's so early in the game right now. We could have people move out. We could have a lot of students from who aren't attending our kindergarten that move into first grade. So we look at that, we look at the bottom, and then we'll sit down and see, okay, where do we need to shift, so we don't have class sizes of, 30 and so forth.
And then finally, I do appreciate this handout as well. It helps to see the base where you think you're going or where you'd like to go, and putting it in comparison to really see what's kind of necessary costs with those that might not be there.
That might be a little more helpful than with the
really help
comprehensive.
the increase, explain the increase to me. And also just in reaching out to some of the teachers, where's the fluff hidden in the budget? And a lot of them said that they thought it was getting much better than it had. Congratulate you on that.
Thank you, thanks.
Mark?
I'm all set.
John?
Just a quick observation, so being a technology person, the technology line staying fluid from year to year is very tough to do. I know you guys do a lot through capital for specific devices. Is that a plan for this year as well?
So, goods and service budget at the high school, Steve Embush was putting together his budget, and we were looking at 2 costly labs up at the high school, engineering and business lab, PCs dedicated, can't be Chromebooks, and so the total was about $25,000. So the school committee had asked us, let's look at different sources of funding rather than just go to the goods and service budget. So we all decided that the best thing to do would be to forego that, reallocate that $25,000 within his budget, and approach capital about doing that specific type of device. So it's not Chromebooks, it's not more of those Chromebooks, but it's a very specific device, and that was a shift out of goods and services into capital.
When you're talking about fees, is there any thought to adding fees for certain curriculum items that are outside the norm? Like for, say, an engineering class where there's an expectancy to have a higher quality computer, the kids have to pay $50 to take that class, or whatever, just to start supplementing the overall cost of running that program for 1, 2, or 3 classes.
We're looking at everything.
We are
but-
willing to consider everything.
Yeah.
There might have some, going back to Mr. Flowers' discussion, where there might have some equity.
We were just saying the have and the have-nots.
Yeah.
That's what you have to.
We're trying to go the other way in some examples. The one thing I will say about fees, it's been about 5 years since our bus fees have gone up, and our bus contract goes up, obviously, every year by about 3%. So it's, whether we like it or not, I'm losing ground very quickly on what we're collecting versus what we're paying. And then a new contract is coming in about a week from now. So we really have to take a close look at that particular fee, because we've lost a lot of ground.
Actually, I do have one. Sorry.
John first, then.
Just one more question, and I could have overlooked it, and it's something that's very important to me, is the safety and security in the schools. I didn't see anything in the budget on that, and is there anything new coming along? What is your thoughts on that?
So it's kind of like my other job is safety and security. So it's a goal of the strategic plan, very delineated goal. I constantly work with the technology director to look at safety within the buildings. We talk to every principal every year. Assess, cameras would be a good example. Do you have blind spots in your building that you're concerned about? Are there issues that happen in a certain area that the camera would help with? Access control is another one we'll probably approach capital with next year. So I've worked with the police department. We do training with them. So some of that, why you don't see that in the goods and services, because I'll do it through our building rental account, and I'll use those resources to put towards doing initiatives like that, especially piloting programs like that. But a lot of what we've done in our schools has been through capital. It's been a tremendous asset for us.
Thank you.
Can I add that we've built a very comprehensive threat assessment, and it's important to mention that because that relates right back to the need for the guidance counselors, because our guidance counselors implement our threat assessment process that we implemented at the start of that under Dr. Goff implemented at the start of this year. And that's where we see a lot of their additional work in ensuring that we are following safety protocols to ensure that every single one of our kids is safe every day through that threat assessment.
Thank you.
The question I had was, and I noted with all the different schools, their budgets haven't changed. When I look at them and I'm going through it, they spent $300 on this thing last year, and now they don't need it this year, and the 300's gone someplace else. What I'm curious about is with the budget, just percentage-wise, like, how much of the budget would you consider like fixed? This is for lights and other things that just don't change much year to year. And then how much of that budget is like available for the principal to determine, this year I'm gonna put it in the music, next year I'll put it here, that kind of.
So a principal's budget's really their discretion. If you look under those tabs, you'll see the building tab. That's where I have my utilities. The principals don't get involved with that. I manage that through my office. But the principal's budget is really their discretion. I mean, we'll weigh in, we'll have initiatives that we talk to them about. We'll decide, all right, you're gonna fund X amount, maybe bill through the central budget, we'll fund some of that amount. But that's really at their discretion. So the fixed cost utilities, that's what I take care of. So it
Okay.
doesn't impact them.
And their budget, is level, like it hasn't gone up, so, we grasp in, with every year, we're trying to, because things go up, anytime that you have shipping costs, or, so you're continually trying to whittle down. Subscription, Sean probably knows, the subscription costs, go up every year. So it's really a balancing act, so sometimes you'll see costs or different, we have to really prioritize where, principals will prioritize where they really want that money to go.
Any other questions, comments? Josette?
Thank you for the presentation. It was very good. You did a great job. Having been here for a bit and sitting through these, it's always been a question over the years of where does the medical end and the education, what that fine line is, and the more time that goes by, the gap has closed, so there's very little wiggle room any longer, and the towns, the taxpayers, end up being on the hook for it because the federal government doesn't stand up and do what it's supposed to do. They'll issue the mandates, but they never, very seldom, fund it to the extent that they should. It's a struggle, and we've got a lot of conversation to have on this, but you did an excellent presentation. It was very informative.
I just want to thank Jim Johnson, because he's been a great support, ear, arguing. It's a collaborative process, but it's great. He's been patient with my questions, and I really have confidence that we'll be able to continue to our work together and come out with a budget that's fiscally responsible, but also what the kids deserve.
Before we let you go, we want to reschedule a second visit with the personnel information.
We would.
And do you see any potential issues with the current year budget where you might need to come back and visit us?
No.
At this point? Okay.
No.
Yeah, Jim had originally scheduled you for Monday the 2nd, and I believe that doesn't work for you.
I could be, but could we do it on Thursday? Is that possible?
Anybody have problems with March 5th, Thursday, March 5th? Okay, and Thursday, March 5th for your revisit?
Okay, we can
Okay. Can you also bring us a summary of the new changes to the teacher contract? Because I understand that that's now in place.
Sure.
So we have a point of reference.
Okay,
Thank you.
definitely.
How are you doing with the other negotiations, or are they off cycle?
Done.
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 ASME's done, so secretaries, custodians are done. Food service is coming up next year, but that's not a major one, but
Okay.
yeah.
And
We've done well.
food service is running in the black still, I hope?
Another fee we might have to consider, but
Okay.
it's been a long time, but, yeah.
All righty. Thank you very much. Jim, did you have any comments or schedule issues at this point?
No, okay.
Okay, so this coming Thursday, thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Group. We have sewer and water, we have Public Works, Building Maintenance, and Parks. So that'll be this coming Thursday. Hope to see everybody there. If you have availability for other days in March, or definite conflicts in March, let me know, because March is wide open, but we are looking to try to shuffle a few things around to move things up on the schedule so it gets into the book. And there being no other questions, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by, is that seconded by Andrew? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained? Thank you very much.